Hey guys, tonight we're traveling farther back than your brain probably thinks history even exists, down into the fertile, muddy cradle between two unpredictable rivers, where the night sky is thick with stars and mosquitoes, and a few brave humans decide to invent civilization from scratch. You're standing in the land the Greeks would later call Mesopotamia, but to the people living here around 4000 BCE, it's just home, a vast stretch of shimmering heat, dust, and mud, full of reeds, frogs, and very questionable water quality. You can practically smell the baked clay and hear the hum of life pulsing along the banks. You're about to meet the Sumerians, the people who built the first real cities in human history. Spoiler, you probably wouldn't survive a week here, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air feels dense, as if soaked in ancient breath. You stand on a flat plain of silt where the horizon just melts into dust. In the distance, low walls shimmer in the heat, mud brick ramparts built by hand so early in time they almost seem impossible. This is Uruk, one of the first cities on Earth. And its people are the Sumerians, the ones who decided that wandering from place to place was too exhausting. They settled, they farmed, they built, and in doing so, they accidentally created the modern world. The city smells of grain and sweat, baked bread and burning bitumen. Donkeys bray at passing carts, and the streets, if you can call these narrow alleys that, buzz with potters, brewers, and merchants selling dates. Somewhere, a child screams happily at a goat. It's chaos, but organized chaos. The kind that makes you realize humans have always been a little bit allergic to silence. The Sumerians came here because these plains, between the Tigris and Euphrates, offered water, even if that water had a habit of destroying everything you loved every few years. The floods could be kind or cruel, depositing rich silt or drowning your entire crop overnight. Historians still argue whether this unpredictability is what birthed the Sumerian obsession with gods. If the rivers behaved like temperamental deities, maybe the only logical move was to invent temperamental deities to match. But before the ziggurats and writing came mud. So much mud. Everything in Sumer is made from it: homes, temples, city walls. There's no stone nearby, no wood to spare, just endless wet earth baked into bricks under the sun. You can almost feel the squelch under your feet. Workers haul baskets of it, mix it with straw, and shape it into future civilizations one rectangle at a time. There's something poetic about it, humanity's first cities rising from the same dirt we've always walked on. At night, when the wind dies and the oil lamps flicker, you can look up and see why this place feels like the beginning of everything. The sky here is massive, an ocean of black, glittering with stars so sharp they almost hum. You can imagine early priests staring upward, charting constellations, wondering if those distant lights were eyes watching back. They named stars after gods, told stories about how the heavens mirrored life below, and started to believe that everything, floods, fertility, even bad barley harvests, had cosmic reasons. You pass a small shrine, a lump of baked clay adorned with shells and broken pottery. A woman leaves a tiny bowl of beer as an offering to some household god whose name has probably been lost to time. There's a strange comfort in the thought, even before written language, humans already had that instinct to please something bigger. And then there's sound, the rhythmic slap of sandals on dust, the hum of chants from the temple district, the whistle of wind through reed huts. The Sumerians don't have metal bells yet, but they've got drums, flutes, and rattles, all used to speak to their gods, or maybe to keep themselves entertained during long nights. You hear laughter spill from a courtyard as someone tells a dirty joke about donkeys. Civilization, you realize, always includes a sense of humor. There's a quirky tidbit about Sumerians that feels almost too modern. They seem to have been obsessed with record keeping before they even had a proper writing system. Little clay tokens marked with shapes, fish, jars. Sheep were used to count things. Imagine inventing accounting before inventing sentences. Historians still argue whether those early tokens were more about trade or about control. Were they for merchants, or for priests keeping everyone honest under divine bureaucracy? Either way, this was humanity's first stab at paperwork, and we've been complaining about it ever since. As the sun sets, the mud walls glow amber, and you can sense how fragile this city really is. One bad flood, one drought, one ambitious neighbor, and all this could vanish back into the earth. But for now, Uruk breathes. It's alive, noisy, alive with people who don't yet know they're inventing history. You walk past a workshop where a potter shapes clay with steady hands, humming an old tune. The air smells faintly of smoke and yeast. Civilization, it turns out, doesn't begin with a grand vision, it begins with the slow rhythm of hands making things that last. Tonight, as you drift through the streets of the world's first city, under a sky older than memory, you realize something soft and unsettling. You're standing at the moment humanity becomes permanent. From here on, people will build, record, dream, and destroy, but they'll never go back to just wandering. The mud brick walls shimmer in the moonlight, and the city hums like a heartbeat. The first heartbeat of us all. The next morning, the light comes early, sliding over the plain in a soft golden sheet, lighting up the mud brick walls like they're made of bronze. The city wakes with the same rhythm as the rivers that define it, the Tigris and the Euphrates. You can almost hear them sighing in the distance, the twin serpents of water that made the Sumerians who they are. Out here, you don't survive without the rivers. But you also don't sleep easy because of them. The ground under your sandals is cracked from last year's flood. When the rivers rise, they don't politely stop at the edge of the fields. They roar in, smashing levees, drowning goats, and carrying off half the neighborhood if they feel like it. And yet, when the waters finally retreat, the fields are reborn, thick with the dark silt that turns seed into grain. The people call it a gift from the gods. You might call it mood swings with good fertilizer. Historians still argue whether the floods were regular enough to plan for, or chaotic enough to terrify everyone into obedience. But either way, the Sumerians learned to adapt. They dig canals, they build dikes, they measure water with carved sticks and prayer. They become the first people on earth to turn the mood of nature into a calendar. You trudge out beyond the walls to where the fields shimmer with young barley. A group of farmers bends low, singing softly as they work. The air smells of wet soil and crushed reed. The sound of distant frogs mingles with the clatter of wooden hoes. Somewhere, a priest in the city is already preparing an offering, bread, beer, a lamb, because if the floods go wrong this year, it's his reputation on the line. It's hard not to see how the landscape itself writes the Sumerian religion. When everything you depend on can drown you in a single night, it's logical to imagine gods who behave the same way, generous one moment, furious the next. You can almost feel the divine anxiety baked into this place. The rivers aren't just water, they're personalities. The Sumerians named them, worshipped them, even accused them of crimes. There's Enki, the god of water and wisdom, the one who supposedly gave humanity the arts of civilization. He's a clever, slightly mischievous deity who loves humans, at least when he's not flooding them by accident. Then there's Enlil, god of air and storms, the ultimate cosmic grump. The stories say he once wiped out humanity for being too noisy. So yes. Apparently, civilization started because someone couldn't stand the neighbors. The fringe tidbit you overhear from a priest's apprentice might make you smile. Some Sumerians believed the rivers had their own divine courts. If one flooded too high, the other could accuse it before the gods. Imagine the Tigris and Euphrates arguing like old married partners. You always overdo it, Tigris. Oh, please, Euphrates, you're the one who never pulls your weight. You walk along the edge of a canal, where reeds sway like green curtains. The canal is narrow, hand-dug, and filled with shimmering brown water. Children splash near the banks, and a farmer yells at a stray goat with the kind of voice that probably hasn't changed in 6,000 years. This is where humanity first learned to command the environment instead of fear it. But it's a delicate command, the kind that can vanish with one bad harvest. You crouch beside a small shrine set on a pile of stones. Someone has left a clay figurine there, its eyes wide and unblinking. It represents one of the local water spirits. The offerings around it, bread crumbs, a broken bead, a smear of honey, remind you that worship here isn't about grand temples, not yet. It's about daily survival. Every family keeps a few gods close at hand, like divine insurance policies. Back in the city, you pass a group of men dragging a wooden plow across the dirt streets. They're repairing the levees before the next flood. A child tags along, chasing lizards and laughing, and one of the men grins, calling out that if the boy works hard, the gods might give him his own field one day. The Sumerians live in a narrow space between gratitude and fear, a rhythm that defines their worldview. When night falls again, you climb one of the city's walls and look out over the glimmering plain. In the fading light, you can see how everything is connected, the canals like veins, the rivers like arteries. The city like a beating heart. The air hums with insects and distant drums from the temples. The stars above seem reflected in the dark, winding channels of water below. For the Sumerians, heaven and earth mirror each other perfectly, one chaotic, one divine, both equally unpredictable. A breeze rises, carrying the scent of damp clay and smoke. Somewhere nearby, someone is telling a flood story again, about how the gods once decided to wipe out humanity, how a man named Ziusidra built a boat and saved life itself. You'll hear later how that myth becomes the blueprint for Noah's Arkansas. The Sumerians tell it first, of course, because they were the ones who lived through real floods every single year. As you sit there, toes dangling over the ancient parapet, the night stretches wide and calm. You realize these rivers aren't just lifelines, they're memory itself. They wash away cities, yes, but they also deposit the soil that lets new ones grow. Maybe that's why the Sumerians are so obsessed with cycles, with time, rebirth, and gods who die and return. Down below, you can hear laughter from a tavern, voices rising and falling like the tide. Civilization began in floodplains, and maybe humanity's sense of humor did too. You breathe in the humid air, feeling the pulse of water beneath the earth, and it hits you that this whole place, the mud, the stars, the songs, isn't just a story of survival. It's the first whisper of control, and as the moon slides over the quiet rivers, painting silver over the black fields, you know you're watching something sacred, the moment humanity learns to bend nature without quite breaking it. Morning again, and the city hums before the sun has even cleared the horizon. You can smell bread baking, clay drying, and the faint tang of copper from some distant forge. Welcome back to Uruk, though now it feels a little less like a settlement and a little more like something truly new. You're standing in one of the world's first cities, and you can almost feel the weight of that word settling into the dust. A city. Crowds, noise, ambition, gossip, all of it crammed together under a sun that never seems to quit. You trudge down a narrow street between mud brick houses. The walls are smooth, beige, and warm to the touch, and tiny doorways open into shaded courtyards where families are already at work. One woman grinds barley on a flat stone, her arms strong and rhythmic. Two boys chase each other with sticks. Somewhere, a goat screams indignantly, possibly at nothing. Civilization, it turns out, sounds like chaos with a rhythm. Uruk is vast for its time, tens of thousands of people jammed inside its walls. There are specialized workers now, potters, brewers, weavers, priests, accountants, yes, already, and laborers who keep the irrigation canals clear. You can't survive here by yourself anymore. You depend on others, on the farmer who grows the grain, the potter who makes your bowl, the merchant who brings the fish, and the temple scribe who decides how much you owe in taxes. Because, yes, congratulations, along with civilization comes the first paperwork. Historians still argue whether taxes were the real engine of early urban life or just a side effect of humans trying to keep track of their stuff. But either way, Uruk hums on the sound of counting. You can hear it everywhere, the murmured tallies of workers, the clink of tokens, the scratch of reed styluses against wet clay. Civilization, as it turns out, is mostly people keeping receipts. You wander toward the central district, where the air smells of incense and smoke. There, the great temple complex rises above the rest of the city. It's dedicated to Inanna, goddess of love, war, and basically all the dramatic plot twists of existence. The temple is more than a house of worship. It's a business hub, a food store, a record office, and maybe the world's first bank. People bring offerings of grain or livestock, and priests redistribute them, supposedly under divine supervision. It's divine socialism, with excellent record-keeping. A priest passes by, robes dusted in ash, carrying a clay tablet so fresh it still glistens in the heat. You glance over his shoulder and see rows of wedge-like marks pressed into the surface. You don't know it yet, but you're looking at the future, the birth of writing, still young and awkward, but already powerful. Those marks will one day tell stories, record laws, and maybe even spark existential crises in literature students thousands of years later. But for now, the people just want to eat. You follow a crowd toward the market. It's not like a modern one, no stalls or signage, just open courtyards filled with piles of goods. Baskets of dates, sacks of grain, dried fish, shiny beads from faraway lands. Merchants shout, bargain, and occasionally accuse each other of cheating. Somewhere, someone plays a reed flute, trying to make the atmosphere seem less like organized robbery. A woman selling beer grins and offers you a cup. It's thick, cloudy, and full of tiny floating grains, but cold and oddly refreshing. You sip, and she laughs, telling you it's made for the gods as much as for humans. You realize that beer is everywhere here, wages are paid in it, offerings poured out in it, and most socializing happens around it. Civilization may have been built on bricks, but it runs on barley. As the day heats up, the streets fill with more people, craftsmen, slaves, herders, and temple workers. You notice that the buildings grow taller near the center, their upper levels coated with bitumen, that shiny black tar that sticks to everything. The smell of it mixes with the desert heat, making the air thick. Somewhere up ahead, someone is shouting, maybe about a broken contract or a bad batch of beer. Civilization comes with paperwork, but also with lawsuits. Apparently, you duck into a shaded side alley, where a man is carving small symbols into a lump of clay. He's a scribe in training, muttering to himself about how the new symbols keep changing. The system isn't perfect yet, too many symbols, too few rules, but it's evolving fast. In a century or two, those marks will standardize into what we now call cuneiform. The world's first writing system. The man wipes his brow and chuckles. They say this'll make life easier, he mutters. But I've written the word barley 100 times today. And my fingers are bleeding. You smile. Bureaucracy hurts, even in prehistory. There's a quirky fact that historians love to point out: writing didn't start as poetry or myth. It started as math. Receipts. Barley quotas. Grain rations for temple workers. The first written word wasn't love or God or freedom. It was probably sheep. By dusk, the air cools, and a low chant echoes through the temple courtyard. Priests burn incense and pour beer into the earth for Inanna, thanking her for another day without catastrophic flooding or famine. The crowd murmurs, bows, and disperses. The city glows in the fading light, every window flickering like a tiny star. You sit on a rooftop and look out across Uruk. The smell of dust and smoke lingers, but the air feels alive. Beneath you, thousands of people move like currents, each one a small part of something enormous. You realize that what's happening here isn't just invention. It's momentum. Humans have created a machine out of themselves, a living network of labor, trade, worship, and record-keeping that never truly stops. It's easy to forget how radical that is. Just a few centuries ago, everyone you knew might have been your cousin. Now, you can't even count the strangers walking past your door. Civilization isn't just progress, it's a leap into anonymity. And somehow, that leap sticks. The moon rises. The canals glimmer. A donkey brays into the night, and somewhere far off, a scribe keeps scratching at his clay tablet by lamplight, making sure someone will remember that 10 jars of beer went missing today. History, you think, starts exactly here, with a complaint filed in wet clay. The heat of the next morning feels sticky, almost syrupy, clinging to your skin like wet dust. You follow the sound of soft tapping, a rhythmic pat-pat-pat echoing through narrow alleys, and it leads you to a shaded courtyard filled with scribes. They sit cross-legged on woven mats, each with a small slab of clay balanced on a wooden board. Their styluses, made from split reeds, dip and press with hypnotic precision. You've stumbled into one of humanity's first offices. Here, in this hum of concentration, the future of memory itself is being invented. Writing, real writing, is happening before your eyes. The clay tablets glisten faintly in the heat, rows upon rows of wedge-shaped impressions carved into their surface. The sound is soothing: tap, scrape, sigh, repeat. You can smell the damp earth, the faint tang of oil from their lamps, and maybe, if you're being honest, a hint of stress. Cuneiform, they call it later, wedge-shaped. It begins as a counting, just like in Uruk's temple, but soon it starts doing more. You pick up a drying tablet and squint. It's not a list of barley rations or sheep this time, it's a story. A few symbols for gods, kings, storms, and floods. Someone is turning daily chaos into narrative. Civilization has just discovered gossip in permanent form. You can't help but smile at the thought that the world's first written record might not be a law or a prayer, but something closer to "you'll never believe what Enki did last night." Historians still argue whether early writing was purely administrative or already carried an element of story, of personality. Either way, what starts as math soon becomes myth, and from there, poetry isn't far behind. The scribes are a special class. They train for years, memorizing hundreds of symbols, some abstract, some pictorial. It's the kind of education that separates them from the farmers and builders. Their fingers are permanently stained with clay dust. Their shoulders ache. But they wield a power no one else does: the ability to trap thoughts in material. When they write, the gods listen. When they record debts, entire livelihoods hinge on their accuracy. You realize the world's first bureaucracy is also the world's first information system. One young scribe catches your gaze and grins, holding up a tablet proudly. "My first full line without breaking it," he says. He's barely more than 16, and already you can tell he'll never have clean fingernails again. He offers to read it to you, tracing the signs with his reed stylus, a record of grain owed to the temple, signed, well, symboled, by 3 farmers. It's mundane. Boring, even. But you can sense how revolutionary it is. Humanity has just broken free from the tyranny of memory. The quirky part: some of the earliest tablets archaeologists have found are basically complaint forms. People accusing neighbors of stealing donkeys, underpaying for fish, or selling bad beer. One tablet even records a temple worker demanding more rations because his superior keeps forgetting to feed him. Bureaucracy, gossip, and grievance, all baked into clay for eternity. You can't help but think, humanity hasn't changed a bit. Nearby, a priest reads aloud from another tablet, his voice solemn. This one isn't about trade, it's a hymn to Inanna. The words flow in rhythm, repeating and looping, half chant, half poem. You close your eyes and let the sound wash over you. It's the first literature. The beginning of beauty that isn't purely survival. Historians still debate which came first, the urge to record the divine or the urge to manage the taxes, but maybe the two were never separate. Maybe the Sumerians knew that you can't have worship without paperwork. you wander deeper into the scribe's quarter, where older men sit surrounded by stacks of drying tablets. Some are flat and wide, others small enough to fit in your palm. They dry them in the sun, then store them in clay jars. Each jar holds hundreds of tablets, names, deals, poems, dreams. The world's first library, maybe, and also the first archive of human neuroses. A breeze stirs through the alley, scattering dust across a half-finished tablet. You notice a series of signs shaped like wedges and arrows, tiny, deliberate. The symbols look abstract, but they're alive. Somewhere in that geometry of lines is the seed of every word you've ever read. From these marks will one day come Hammurabi's laws, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Book of Genesis, and the shopping list on your fridge. You lean against a wall and listen to the tap-tap-tap continue. There's something oddly calming about it, like rain on stone. It feels eternal. Maybe it is eternal. After all, archaeologists today can still read these marks, 6,000 years later. The Sumerians might have faded into dust, but their words never did, and yet, the system isn't perfect. Sometimes scribes get creative with spelling. Sometimes they add extra signs for fun, or copy things wrong on purpose to mess with trainees. One clay tablet found centuries later even contains what seems to be a teacher's angry note: "Why do you keep skipping practice? The gods see your laziness." Apparently, the first student excuses were already being invented. You step back out into the sunlight, blinking. The streets of Uruk stretch before you, alive and loud, but now you see them differently. Every goat bleat, every shouted price, every whispered prayer, soon, someone will write it down. The city is transforming into a memory machine. At the end of the street, a small child kneels in the dirt, drawing circles with a stick. He's too young for clay tablets, but he's already imitating the scribes. The shapes mean nothing, but the instinct is there, to mark, to record, to prove existence through pattern. Civilization isn't just built on stone and mud, it's built on symbols, on the quiet desire not to be forgotten. As dusk falls, the scribes finish their day's work. They set the last tablets out to dry, each one shining softly in the amber light. You imagine the heat of their hands, the sound of their styluses, the faint murmur of pride as they realize they've done something extraordinary. They've made thought visible, and as you walk away, the scent of clay still in your nose, you realize this might be the most human smell of all, the smell of earth reshaped into meaning. The sun sits high and merciless when you return to the heart of Uruk. Its rays flash off something that looks like a stairway to heaven, or at least to the first floor of it. You squint, shading your eyes, and there it is, the ziggurat. A temple unlike any the world has seen before, stacked tier upon tier, like a mountain built by hands that have never seen a mountain. It dominates the horizon, every step coated in sun-baked clay and glazed brick that once must have gleamed like gold. The air smells of bitumen and incense. The ziggurat isn't just architecture, it's theology made physical. You can feel the gravity of it, the way it draws every gaze upward, toward gods that may or may not be paying attention. The Sumerians built it for their goddess Inanna, patron of love, war, and dramatic decisions. She's the original multitasker, divine queen of both tenderness and chaos. The priests say this temple is her ladder to the heavens. The place where she descends at dusk and rises at dawn. You start the climb. Each step is steep, uneven, and shimmering in the heat. The city hums below, donkeys braying, hammers pounding, the faint echo of chanting from the courtyards. The Sumerians believed that climbing the ziggurat brought you closer not just to the gods but to order itself, the balance that holds the universe together. Historians still argue whether the structure was meant as an astronomical observatory, a cosmic symbol, or just really impressive real estate for divine tenants. But one thing's certain, when you stand on top, the world feels both enormous and small. The higher you go, the thinner the air seems. Hot and dry. Your sandals slip a little on smooth brick, and you wonder how priests did this every morning without tripping over their robes. You reach a landing halfway up and pause. From here, the canals look like silver threads stitched through brown fabric. Fields shimmer in the distance. Uruk itself stretches like a living mosaic, all clay and color. And beyond it, endless desert. Civilization feels fragile again, like it's just a patch of green stubbornness in a sea of sand. A priest passes you, humming softly, carrying a bowl of grain and a small jug of beer. His expression is calm, devout, and slightly sweaty. The goddess is thirsty, he says with a smile. You can't tell if he's joking. He gestures for you to follow him up the final set of steps. At the summit, there's a flat platform, a holy space open to the wind. A small altar stands in the center, surrounded by jars of offerings, oil, honey, and what looks suspiciously like perfume. A few clay figurines sit in a line, their wide eyes reflecting the sky. The priest kneels, murmuring in a language that sounds half-sung, half-breathed. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. The wind whistles softly around the structure. And the smell of warm clay and oil rises. For a fleeting instant, you can almost believe the goddess is real. The quirky part is that Inanna, also known later as Ishtar, wasn't just worshipped as a goddess of love. She was fierce, unpredictable, and possibly the earliest recorded deity to demand gender equality in power and chaos. Some of her hymns talk about her descending into the underworld, defying death, and returning stronger. You might say she invented the concept of main character energy. From up here, the world looks organized: fields, canals, temples, houses, all neatly arranged. But you know it's just an illusion. Down there, life is messy: floods, taxes, gossip, ambition. The ziggurat is humanity's first attempt to impose order on that mess, to make the universe itself look structured. It's a monument to control in a world that constantly slips away. As the priest finishes his prayer, he pours beer into a small clay basin, letting it seep into the cracks between bricks. She'll drink it through the earth, he explains. All things return to her. You glance down the side of the ziggurat, watching the dark liquid trail downward, and wonder how many gallons of divine beer have vanished into the soil over the centuries. Enough to fill a small canal, probably. Historians still debate whether these temples were open to common people or reserved for the elite. Some argue the public only gathered at the base, never seeing the rituals up top. Others think processions wound up the stairs for festivals, everyone singing and sweating together under the relentless sun. Either way, the ziggurat wasn't just a building, it was a statement. It said, "We are organized, we are powerful, and our gods are home." You sit for a while, feeling the heat radiate through the bricks. The city below glows like an ember. Smoke curls from cooking fires, and somewhere, a flute begins to play. You can hear laughter, arguments, prayers, all blending into one long, human murmur. From up here, it sounds almost musical. Civilization's heartbeat again, steady and unbroken. As dusk falls, the sky turns the color of pomegranate and blood. Shadows stretch long across the fields. The priest lights an oil lamp, and its flicker throws soft gold over the altar. You think about how many centuries this has gone on: priests climbing, gods waiting, people watching from below. No electricity, no steel, no glass, just mud, flame, and faith. And somehow, it's enough. When night finally wraps around the city, the stars spill across the sky like crushed salt. You look up, and for a moment, the ziggurat feels less like a building and more like a bridge. The first, fragile step between earth and the infinite, a cool wind moves over the summit. The priest murmurs one last prayer, his voice blending with the wind: "May she bless our city. May the flood come gentle this year." You realize that's all civilization ever asks for: not wealth, not fame, just gentleness from the forces that can erase it overnight. You start back down the steps, slow and careful, the night air cooling the bricks under your palms. Below, the city flickers with lamps. The temple bells sound faint and low, and for the first time, you feel it, the weight of history not as something long gone, but as something still alive beneath your feet. Morning returns soft and gold, spilling across the courtyards and rooftops of UR. You walk through the narrow lanes where women sweep doorsteps, chatter with neighbors, and knead dough beneath hanging bundles of reeds. The smell of grain and wet clay fills the air. It's easy to assume this is a man's world. Kings, priests, and scribes always take the credit, but as you watch, you realize the heartbeat of Sumer is distinctly feminine. You stop at a courtyard where a group of women sit weaving long threads on wooden looms. Their fingers move so quickly it's hypnotic. Cloth, dyed in earthy reds and muted blues, ripples between them like water. For the temple, one explains, smiling faintly. The priestess of Inanna will wear this when she sings. Her eyes shine when she says the goddess's name. For Sumerian women, Inanna is more than a deity of love and war, she's a mirror. Fierce, clever, unpredictable, and wholly divine, you pass through the marketplace again, noticing now how many women are running the stalls. One barters for fish, another sells perfume made from pressed myrrh and oil. A mother balances a child on her hip while weighing wool on a scale. The clay tokens she uses are stamped with her personal seal. Independence, even if limited, hums quietly between the bricks. Historians still argue whether Sumerian women were truly free. The records are contradictory. Some tablets list female property owners, merchants, even scribes, others show women traded as part of marriage contracts or temple offerings. But the pattern is clear. While men might have ruled in name, women were essential to how things actually worked. At the temple of Inanna, you see the high priestess emerge, her linen robes gleaming in the sun. She is called the Antu, and she isn't just symbolic, she is political power embodied. Chosen often from royal blood, she mediates between gods and mortals, leads rituals, and oversees temple wealth. In some eras, her authority rivals the king's. You wonder what she thinks when the priests talk about divine order. Does she ever roll her eyes behind her veil? Inside the temple, incense coils in smoky ribbons toward the ceiling. The priestesses hum softly, their chants blending with the deep beat of a drum. You kneel near a fountain and watch as they pour oil into the water, reading omens in the ripples. A young girl whispers beside you, "If Inanna smiles, the harvest will be good." Her voice trembles slightly, as though she's not entirely sure the goddess listens anymore. Later, in a quieter corner of the city, you meet another kind of woman, the scribe's apprentice. She sits in the shade, stylus poised over a clay tablet, copying lines of cuneiform with a furrowed brow. "My brother says women shouldn't write," she mutters without looking up. "But my teacher says Inanna wrote the first words in heaven." You smile. Maybe that's true. Or maybe it's just the sort of story Sumer tells to keep itself inspired. You ask what she's writing. "A contract," she says. "A widow selling land to her nephew." The lines are neat, balanced. Every name is followed by a mark, proof, identity, trust. "The gods watch everything." She adds quietly, but you can tell she believes in something more human, fairness. By the next sunrise, the city hums with a quieter energy. The priests are not chanting, the merchants not shouting. Instead, a hush lingers over the courtyards and roofs. You follow a group of robed men carrying strange tools, strings, rods, wax tablets, up toward the temple's upper terrace. "We study the heavens," one tells you, his tone part reverence, part pride. "Up here, above the smoke and noise, the air feels different, still, heavy with heat and wonder." You kneel beside one of the priests as he aligns a string with the horizon, marking where the sun rises. He notes it on a tablet with neat wedge marks. Another records the moon's sliver, counting nights until it vanishes. It's almost hypnotic. You realize you're watching the first scientists, though they wouldn't use that word. For them, the sky isn't a set of equations. It's a living text written by gods. The stars speak, and humanity listens. And yet, beneath that divine gloss, there's method. They observe, measure, compare, predict. The Sumerians invent astronomy because they want to know when to plant barley and when the floods will come. But in the process, they stumble upon the logic of the cosmos. A priest hands you a small clay tablet, pointing to rows of symbols. Each wedge is a day, he says. Each mark, the moon's face. You recognize the rhythm, a lunar calendar. 12 months, each about 30 days. The gods love order, he adds. Maybe so, but clearly, humans love it more. Historians still argue whether the Sumerians understood what they'd created, a mathematical system flexible enough to describe time itself. They divided the circle into 360 degrees, the hour into 60 minutes, the minute into 60 seconds. You check your modern watch and realize, you still live inside their logic. It's been over 5,000 years. And you haven't escaped their counting. Below, the city begins to shimmer in the sun. From this height, UR looks like an intricate circuit, alleys, courtyards, canals. The priests whisper calculations while another kneels beside a pool, reading the reflections of clouds. The gods will send rain, he mutters. You squint at the perfectly clear sky and raise an eyebrow. He smiles. Eventually. You wander down from the terrace, your thoughts buzzing with numbers. In the temple courtyard, an old man kneels beside a boy with a bandaged arm. He mixes crushed herbs into oil and spreads it gently over the wound. Say this, he murmurs to the child, Shamash, bring warmth to the cold bone. You recognize it, not superstition, but early medicine. Healing by touch, faith, and experimentation, Sumerian healers cataloged hundreds of remedies, plants, minerals, even animal fats. They wrote them down, line by line, on clay tablets that would later become the ancestors of medical textbooks. They believed sickness came from angry gods or malevolent spirits, but that didn't stop them from applying poultices, draining wounds, or prescribing rest. Civilization. You realize, thrives not on certainty but curiosity. Further along the street, you spot a small school, a idubba, the tablet house. Inside, boys, and occasionally girls, sit cross-legged, reciting words under the watchful gaze of a stern teacher. Repeat. He commands, slapping a reed stylus on the floor. The students murmur in unison, king, temple, water, barley, sheep. You hear the rhythm of learning, the echo of a system that will one day become literacy itself. Young student glances at you, exasperated. He makes us write until our hands ache, he whispers. But when I write, I feel like I exist. You smile. That might be the most profound thing anyone in Sumer has said all day. Outside, the air shimmers with heat. You walk along a canal lined with stone and reeds, where engineers, yes, engineers, are inspecting the walls. One lowers a weighted line to measure depth. Another marks the rate of flow with clay pegs. The city depends entirely on these channels. One flood too high, and fields drown. One drought too long, and famine comes. So they calculate, adjust, and pray. One of the men points to a series of grooves cut into the wall. These are the old marks, he says. The floods used to come higher. He frowns, studying the latest measurement. The river changes. Always. His tone carries a quiet anxiety that feels strangely modern. Even the first civilizations were haunted by climate. A little farther down, you pass a craftsman shaping a clay mold for casting metal. The smell of heated bronze clings to the air, sharp, metallic, almost sweet. Sparks flash as molten copper is poured. The craftsman grins at you. You think the gods gave us this? He asks. No. We stole it. He laughs and wipes his brow. But they haven't taken it back yet. You think about that as you walk. The Sumerians were builders, brewers, dreamers, but above all, tinkerers. They experimented with materials, shapes, and systems. They invented the wheel, the plow, the sailboat, all to make life a little less exhausting. But behind every invention was a spark of defiance, a small voice saying, "Maybe we can do better than the gods allow." Back at the temple, the sun begins to dip. The priests gather again, marking the stars as they emerge one by one. You lie on the warm stone and watch alongside them. The constellations rise in patterns they know by heart: the bull of heaven, the scorpion, the goatfish. Each one, whispers a young acolyte, is a story written by the gods. You nod, but you can't help thinking it's the humans who are doing the real writing. As the sky darkens fully, a breeze lifts the dust and carries with it the faint smell of oil lamps and incense. Below, the river glimmers, reflecting the stars the priests adore so much. You feel the weight of history pressing softly against your chest. Civilization didn't just appear, it was calculated, counted, and carved into order by hands that believed in both mystery and measurement. You close your eyes for a moment. The hum of the city merges with the quiet breath of the universe above. You think about time, 60 seconds, 60 minutes, 12 months, and how it all began here, under this same starlight. You've been wandering through the winding lanes of Ur, the baked mud under your sandals still warm from the day's heat. Around you, statues of gods peer from alcoves and corners, their stone eyes always watching. The Sumerians don't just believe in gods, they're practically surrounded by them. Every gust of wind, every slightly crooked sheep, every bad batch of beer must be the work of some divine personality. Theirs is a world absolutely teeming with deities, and somehow, none of them seem to be on vacation. Take Enlil, the chief god, his job description reads like a cosmic janitor's nightmare. He's responsible for air, wind, storms, and the destiny of nations. He can bless a city with fertile fields one day and flatten it with a flood the next. Historians still argue whether the Sumerians loved him or feared him, but it's safe to say they offered plenty of sacrifices just in case. Then there's Enki, the trickster god of wisdom and water, who occasionally saves humanity from Enlil's temper tantrums. He's the kind of god who'd flood your house but leave a note saying, "It's for your own good." You see, the Sumerian gods were less like holy perfection and more like a messy family group chat, loud, dramatic, and occasionally smiting each other. Inanna, the goddess of love and war, could inspire poetry one minute and destroy cities the next. She was both adored and feared, ruling over passions that made and unmade kingdoms. Her descent into the underworld was one of humanity's first recorded myths. A story of ego, death, and a comeback more dramatic than any reality show finale. Scholars still debate whether that tale reflects a seasonal ritual or something deeper about the human fear of oblivion. The temples, or ziggurats, weren't just for worship, they were divine offices where priests managed both the gods' moods and the city's ledgers. You might imagine holy silence, but no, it's bustling. Livestock bleating, incense burning, scribes tallying grain, and somewhere, a priest muttering about divine expenses that don't add up. The gods, it turns out, were terrible at budgeting. Yet through this organized chaos, Sumerians created something profound, the first link between spiritual order and political control. The temple didn't just house gods, it was the beating administrative heart of society. You climb the steps of a ziggurat at dusk. The air smells like bitumen and oil lamps. From the top, you can see the whole city, fields, canals, and beyond them, the desert that seems to stretch into forever. The priest beside you lifts his arms to the horizon, chanting to Nana, the moon god, whose silver glow is just beginning to shimmer above the Tigris. Down below, the people finish their prayers, farmers thanking for rain, merchants begging for fortune, parents pleading for their children's health. Every wish floats upward like invisible smoke, joining a constant, wordless conversation between heaven and earth. There's a strange beauty in it, the idea that nothing happens without a divine signature. When the rivers overflow, it's not just nature, it's a god expressing disapproval. When crops thrive, someone must have prayed particularly well that week. Even the mundane feels sacred here. The baker who overbakes a loaf might blame Ninkasi, goddess of beer and fermentation, for distracting him. You can almost hear him sigh, "Sorry, my lady, too much yeast." A quirky detail surfaces in the clay records. The Sumerians believed their gods literally lived in the statues. When a new temple idol was made, priests opened its mouth, performing a ceremony that magically invited the divine spirit inside. From then on, it needed to be fed, washed, and treated with respect, or else. Imagine being the poor temple servant assigned to clean a 30-foot idol of Enlil every day, terrified that one missed spot could summon a drought. The pantheon wasn't static either, it kept expanding, splitting, merging, like an ancient franchise. City-states had their own patron gods, and as conquests happened, their deities were often adopted rather than erased. It's like divine corporate mergers, effective immediately. Ishtar will oversee love operations across all regions. Even enemies might pray to each other's gods, just in case they switched sides mid-battle. You can almost picture two armies squaring off, each yelling, "Inanna, please pick us." But despite all this divine bureaucracy, Sumerians never lost their curiosity. They wondered what lay beyond the stars, why storms struck, and whether the gods ever got tired of humans' noise. Some scholars argue that their complex theology, messy, contradictory, and deeply human, was their greatest creation, a mirror of themselves. You step down from the ziggurat as night thickens. The streets are quiet now except for distant drums and the soft chanting of priests. Above, constellations shimmer like ancient cuneiform scribbles, each one telling another cosmic story. Somewhere out there, Enki chuckles at humanity's confusion, Inanna sharpens her spear, Enlil exhales, sending a faint breeze across the sleeping city. You feel small but oddly connected. The same sky, the same yearning for meaning. And maybe, deep down, the same suspicion that the gods, however many they were, might have been making it up as they went along, too. The next morning, a thin layer of mist clings to the canals, softening the hard lines of UR. You follow the smell of wet clay and barley toward a workshop tucked between two houses. Inside, artisans hammer, carve, and mold with focused intensity. This is the birthplace of Sumerian craftsmanship, every object functional, ornamental, and occasionally over-engineered for reasons no one alive can fully remember. A potter's wheel spins smoothly under the hands of a young apprentice. He shapes a vessel, small and elegant, for storing perfume or oil. You notice tiny symbols scratched along the rim, cuneiform signatures. Even objects of everyday use are personalized, signed by their makers as if to say, "I existed. I touched this." Historians still argue whether these marks were purely practical or an early form of self-expression. Either way, they feel like little echoes of personality frozen in clay. Nearby, a metalworker pours molten bronze into a mold. Sparks flare as liquid copper hits the cooler edges. The clang of hammer on metal is rhythmic, almost musical. These craftsmen invent tools, weapons, and jewelry that will travel across centuries. You imagine that one day, a Sumerian bronze knife will end up in a museum, admired not for its sharpness but for its ingenuity, the ingenuity of a civilization still very much alive in the small details. A young woman spins wool into thread using a drop spindle. Her fingers move with graceful repetition, twisting raw fibers into a usable cord. Every braid, every knot, every loop is calculated for strength. She hums a melody under her breath, a tune you suspect has been passed down for generations. It's a minor ritual, invisible to most, yet crucial. Weaving isn't just survival, it's culture, memory, and rhythm rolled into one. Across the street, children play with clay models of animals and carts. They copy the shapes of adult life, boats, sheep, plows. One boy presses tiny symbols into a miniature tablet. He doesn't know the full language yet, but the impulse is clear. Civilization begins as imitation, but with time, these small acts of mimicry become mastery. By the time the boy is an adult, he might be shaping the very systems that govern life in UR. The workshop smells of wet clay, metal, and smoke. You inhale deeply. It's alive, tactile, and endlessly inventive. The Sumerians understood that survival alone wasn't enough. Innovation and artistry were part of enduring existence. Every utensil, every woven basket, every engraved tablet is a testament to that belief, and yet, not everything is orderly. One apprentice accidentally spills molten bronze. Another pot cracks in the kiln. A woven mat frays before completion. Mistakes are as much a part of creation as success. It's charmingly human, a civilization already 6,000 years old, learning through trial, error, and stubborn curiosity. You wander past a small altar where incense burns. Tiny figurines, representing deities of craft and commerce, gaze down at the artisans. Even in the act of making, spirituality threads through life. Sumerians don't separate the sacred from the practical, their work is devotion. Their devotion a practical skill. Nearby, a craftsman shows you a carved cylinder seal. You roll it across a damp clay tablet and watch intricate patterns emerge, animals, gods, even abstract designs. This is personal branding in miniature form, proof of identity, ownership, and prestige. The quirky part. Some seals include tiny jokes, like a monkey stealing a fruit or a man slipping in mud, little glimpses of humor hidden within bureaucracy. You smile, realizing some things never change. Outside, a caravan arrives, carrying lapis lazuli and carnelian. The merchants exchange clay tokens, record quantities, and weigh goods on stone balances. The city thrives on trade, and trade thrives on precision. Trust, and ingenuity. You think of the artisans inside the workshop, the scribes tallying numbers, the farmers who grew the barley, all linked by a delicate web of interdependence. By late afternoon, the sun casts long shadows over the streets. You pause to watch a small forge burn low, the metal cooling slowly. The smell of earth and fire, clay and bronze, lingers in your hair. Civilization, you realize, isn't just laws, temples, or kings, it's the countless, deliberate acts of making, measuring, and imagining. Every object, every tool, every tiny mark carries a lineage, an invisible thread connecting the Sumerians of UR to the world that will come after. As evening descends, the artisans wipe their hands, extinguish lamps, and leave their work to cool. The city exhales, calm and quiet now. You walk along the canals, listening to water lapping against the banks. Somewhere, a child hums a melody of work, worship, and wonder. And you understand, deeply, the Sumerians didn't just build cities, they built culture itself, with sweat, skill, and a stubborn determination to leave a mark. Evening drapes its warm amber over UR, softening the edges of the mud brick walls and the sharp angles of the ziggurats. The city exhales a slow, rhythmic sigh, the kind that carries the smell of baked clay, barley, and smoke from countless hearths. You wander past the marketplace, now quieter, stalls partially shuttered, merchants counting coins or tokens, children chasing each other through alleyways. Civilization feels less like an abstract concept and more like this, a living, breathing web of routines, rituals, and tiny acts that all somehow hold together. You pause near a courtyard where a small group of men and women are reciting prayers before a low altar. They chant in unison, offering grain, beer, and fragrant oils to the gods. Their voices rise and fall, merging with the rustle of leaves and the soft trickle of water in a nearby basin. Even now, as night begins to settle, the divine presence feels immediate, tangible, almost like the air itself is listening. Some scholars still argue whether this devotion was purely spiritual or also an early mechanism for social control. Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. Nearby, a scribe leans over a tablet, stylus pressed to clay, recording the day's transactions. You watch as he carefully counts rations for workers, noting each name and measure with precision. The system seems tedious, almost obsessive, yet it is the backbone of Sumerian society. Every loaf of bread, every jar of beer, every sack of barley is meticulously accounted for. Without these records, the city would collapse into disorder like a heap of uncooked clay. Across the street, an artisan puts finishing touches on a small statue of Inanna, her eyes wide, lips slightly parted. Even the tiniest detail carries meaning, power, fertility, vigilance. You realize that Sumerians encoded themselves, their society, and their faith into every object they created. Craftsmanship and devotion, utility and symbolism, intertwine in a delicate dance that keeps the culture alive. As darkness spreads, the canals shimmer with reflected lamplight. Boats drift silently, their cargo of reeds, fish, and clay moving steadily downstream. Somewhere, a fisherman sings quietly to himself, a melody that probably hasn't changed in generations. You breathe in the humid air, feel the cool brush of evening wind, and notice how much of civilization is ordinary, repetitive, almost invisible, yet utterly essential. A curious tidbit comes to mind. Sumerians believed in demons that lurked in doorways and fields, capable of stealing breath or mischieving crops. Small amulets and charms were tucked into homes, woven into clothing, or buried under thresholds to protect against these spirits. Sometimes it seems the divine, the mundane, and the paranoid were inseparably entwined, an early example of humans negotiating with uncertainty through ritual and belief. You wander up a narrow street toward a small temple atop a platform. From here, you can hear the priests chanting, the distant murmur of a market closing, and the faint laughter of children heading home. The scent of fresh bread mixes with incense and river mud. Civilization is revealed not in monumental architecture alone but in these overlapping sensory layers, the tactile, the olfactory, the social, the spiritual. Historians still debate whether Sumer's achievements, writing, law codes, irrigation, astronomy, were the product of individual genius or collective necessity. Watching the city now, it's easy to imagine that both are true. The king and priest may receive praise, but the laborers, scribes, women, and children are the true architects. Every brick, every tablet, every stitch of woven cloth contributes to the city's ongoing survival. The night deepens. Lamps flicker in houses, fires glow faintly behind doors, and the ziggurat's outline becomes a dark silhouette against a star-strewn sky. Somewhere, someone begins reciting Gilgamesh once again, the words of a story older than memory itself. Echoing across the city, tying past to present, human to divine, you feel the pulse of you are beneath your feet. Civilization is not just walls or temples, it is breath, ritual, labor, and imagination all layered together. And in that moment, you understand why the Sumerians are remembered, not merely for what they built, but for how they transformed existence into a story, written in clay, blood, water, and spirit. Still echoing 5,000 years later, night has fallen fully over Ur, and the city takes on a hushed, almost reverent tone. The ziggurat looms above, a silent guardian of streets now emptied of children and most merchants. You wander past closed shops, past sleeping animals tethered to posts, past the soft glow of lamps flickering behind doorways. Civilization here is quiet now, not because it ceases, but because it pulses beneath the surface, the heartbeat of a society meticulously built over generations. You pass a small temple where the high priestess of Inanna oversees a final ritual before bed. The air smells of honey, burnt oils, and the faint metallic tang of offerings left at the altar. She hums softly, counting prayers, aligning small statues of her goddess. Even in the stillness, there's movement, ritual, devotion, a reminder that in Sumer, spirituality never sleeps. Historians still argue whether these daily routines were purely religious, or part of a system of social cohesion designed to maintain order. Either way, you notice how the lines blur. Devotion, administration, and survival are all intertwined. Down by the canals, you watch fishermen returning from their final rounds, nets empty or full, depending on luck and skill. Children peer sleepily from windows, their whispers carrying across water and stone. You realize the city thrives not through grand gestures alone, but through countless tiny acts repeated day after day. Barley counted. Clay shaped, prayers whispered, canals cleaned, boats steered. These small, ordinary labors are what give Sumer its enduring pulse. A little further along, a scribe finishes the last tablet for the day. He presses the stylus into the clay one final time, then carefully places it to dry. These tablets, some mundane and bureaucratic, others epic and poetic, are the lifeblood of memory. Without them, the stories, rules, and knowledge of UR would be lost like reeds scattered in the wind. It's fascinating to consider that civilization itself hinges as much on recording and remembering as on building and conquering. You wander past a courtyard where women are putting the last of the evening's food into storage jars. Their movements are fluid, practiced, almost hypnotic. You recall Kababa, the legendary woman who rose from tavern keeper to queen, and realize that women, both historical and mythical, form the silent scaffolding of this society. Sumerian civilization was not built solely by kings or priests, it was maintained, nurtured, and innovated by countless hands, visible and invisible alike. Somewhere, a child practices writing on a clay tablet, pressing wedges with careful precision. "I will be a scribe someday," he whispers. You smile, because even without knowing the future, he participates in the great chain of culture, measurement, and memory. The same impulse that drives the high priestess, the metalworker, and the farmer, the desire to act, record, and preserve, links every generation of Sumerians together. A soft wind carries the faint sound of chanting from the ziggurat. The gods, if they exist as the Sumerians imagined, are listening. Perhaps they smile, perhaps they shrug. But one thing is certain, UR is alive. Civilization, messy and fragile, endures not because of perfect order, but because humans keep showing up, day after day, building, imagining, recording, and believing. You stop for a moment. Staring up at the stars above the Tigris. Each constellation, each flickering point of light, feels like an echo of the stories, innovations, and ambitions of a people long gone yet never forgotten. The Sumerians didn't just invent cities or writing, they invented a way of being human, curious, creative, meticulous, and stubbornly alive in the face of chaos. And as you take a deep breath of night air, carrying scents of river mud, baked bread, and incense, you sense the faint but unyielding pulse of a civilization that, in its own quiet way, set the template for every city, every story, every measurement, and every dream that came after. Now, the streets of UR are quiet. The lamps flicker low, casting soft shadows that stretch lazily across mud brick walls. You sit on the edge of a canal, watching the water shimmer under a pale moon. The gentle lapping of the river soothes you, and for a moment, the pulse of the city slows to match your own breath. You remember the artisans, the farmers, the scribes, the priestesses, each quietly shaping a civilization with hands, minds, and hearts fully present in every act. Above, stars glint like tiny tablets in the sky, each one seemingly holding a story, a prayer, a record of days long past. You imagine Sumerians looking up at this same expanse, weaving myths and epics, counting time, measuring fields, and dreaming of kings and gods. In their stories, mistakes were as sacred as triumphs, laughter as meaningful as ritual, and human curiosity as potent as divine decree. Civilization, it seems, was never a finished product, it was a living, breathing tapestry, fragile yet persistent, stitched together by countless small, deliberate acts. As the night deepens, the sounds of the city soften, distant chants, a child stirring, the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. You feel a connection across time, a quiet resonance with people who lived thousands of years ago. Their hopes, fears, and ambitions ripple through the ages, reminding you that even in impermanence, there is endurance. The Sumerians' inventions, their myths, their meticulous records, they all whisper that humanity's desire to observe, to remember, and to create is eternal. slowly, your body relaxes, and the world around you seems to dissolve into gentle warmth. The tigress murmurs softly, the lamps gutter out, and the ziggurat becomes a silhouette in the night. You realize that civilization is not only built on walls and canals, tablets and tools, but on patience, care, imagination, and the quiet persistence of ordinary people. It's a comforting thought, a lullaby that stretches across time. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let the heartbeat of UR carry you gently toward sleep. The Sumerians rest, the river rests, and now, so can you, cradled in the calm knowledge that even the smallest actions leave echoes that endure far longer than any one life.